Hello guys, welcome back to our anime explainer. Guys, please like the video and subscribe to my channel. Today is explanation of Tales of Herding God Part 234 based on novel. So let's start. The second heaven of founding Emperor Celestial Heavens. Qin Mu looked around and saw ruins everywhere. There were collapsed city walls and palaces, broken flying cities in the sky, worn-out mountains and rivers, as well as skeletons that covered the land. The huge mountains in the distance were also badly damaged. The mountain peaks were like corncobs that got gnawed messily. Even a huge chunk of the core was bitten off and made the mountains look like they could fall anytime. The ground that had split apart were all covered with volcanoes and lava. Rivers were the blood that flowed on land. The blood here were actually huge rivers of lava. There were strange pieces of broken stars and strangely shaped clouds in the sky. Those clouds should be the traces left behind by the divine arts. When Qin Mu stepped on the ground, he noticed that the earth had completely hardened. No plants could grow here. Suddenly, a gust blew by and he saw an unforgettable sight. The bones of numerous people had turned into a lump of bones as they got swept by the wind, rolling past in front of him. A moment later, numerous huge white bone balls tumbled around randomly in front of him as they got blown away by the gusts. When the wind finally stopped, those white bone balls stopped as well and scattered on the ground. Next, broken souls came out from those white bones. They floated around like will-o'-the-wisps. Many faces could still be seen, but their bodies were all tattered, missing arms or legs. When the wind picked up again, the broken souls quickly flew back into the bones as those skeletons tried to run to avoid the gust. However, as they ran, they got swept up by the wind and started tumbling. Numerous white bone hands grabbed each other, and they gathered into a huge white bone ball that got blown away by the wind. Qin Mu had never seen or heard this kind of strange sight before. These broken souls should be the souls of these life forms that had died here. Because their souls aren't complete, Yudu doesn't take them in and let them roam the world. Qin Mu thought to himself. They don't have anything to rely on, so they have to enter the skeletons. Only by entering the skeletons could they feel they are still alive. I think I'm going to die. Behind him, Sakra Buddha's breath was weak as he said in a decrepit tone. Red Deity of the Southern Heaven Qi Xiaoyu's abilities are too high. A single tune from her is enough to take my life. I think I'm about to die. Little friend Qin, you shall move on by yourself. Okay. Qin Mu said without hesitation, after you die, I shall bury you and be on my way. Does Buddha wants to be buried or be cremated? Sakra Buddha stared with his eyes wide open and said furiously, I haven't died yet and you are already thinking of burial and cremation. Qin Mu said with a smile, even though I haven't cultivated Sakra scripture for long, I know how powerful this technique is. Both corporeal body and primordial spirit are top-notch and unbreakable, so even though it's inferior to an emperor's throne technique, it isn't far from it. Buddha has cultivated for so many years, so how could you be killed with one tune? Sakra Buddha blinked his eyes, his face paling as he said, to protect you. I had no choice, but to take Red Deity Qi Xiaoyu's Zither notes head-on. My life force is already shattered. Red Deity Qi Xiaoyu's divine art had crossed the space and came chasing over. So it had already erased the energy that was shifting mutually. The power of the divine art had already been halved by that wave of energy. Qin Mu analyzed and continued, therefore, what Buddha had faced was just the other half of the power. This power is still not enough to threaten Buddha's life, right? Besides, I have heard the tune Red Deity had played before. It's quite a famous Zither song. The name of this song is called The Phoenix Seeks His Mate. Sakra Buddha continued to blink his eyes and said weakly, what phoenix seeks his mate? I've never heard that song before. There is a beautiful woman, I saw her and cannot forget. If the whole day I don't see her, thinking of her leads to madness. I'm like the male phoenix flying, soaring and roaming, over 4 seas searching for my female phoenix. But unfortunately, that beautiful woman is not at this eastern wall. Taking up the Qin as a substitute for words, I intend to unburden myself of these true feelings. On what day will I see your acceptance of a betrothal, and relieve my restless anxiety? Qin Mu sang loudly, his hands stroking through the air. Even though there was no zither or strings under his hands, his vital qi transformed into strings of a zither and gave off notes that were the same as the tune Red Deity Qi Xiaoyu had used to chase them. The youth stroked his zither and sang loudly, abandoning all restraint. How can we entwine our necks like mandarin ducks? How can we flutter about, and together soar? Lady Phoenix, come with me and nest, be supported, breed with me, forever be my wife. Exchanging affection in a physical way will harmonize our hearts. At midnight, if you follow me, who will know? Our wings together will rise, fluttering as high we fly. If you are unmoved by my feelings, it will cause me misery. The tune of the zither surrounded both of them and lingered around for a very long time. A lot of skeletons got attracted by the sound of his zither and his song. They surrounded them and listened attentively. Some of the skeletons even started dancing to his song. Qin Mu scattered his vital qi and said, "The phoenix seeks his mate" is written by a man for a woman. The lyrics is about a man persuading a woman to elope with him. They had a one-night stand in the past, and the man wanted this woman to remember this love affinity fondly, abandoning everything to leave with him. Sakra Buddha was silent. He suddenly sat up and pat off the dirt on his body. He waved his hand to chase away the skeletons that were eavesdropping at the side. "What are you guys looking at? What's there to look at? Go away, go away." Little friend Qin, founding Emperor Celestial Heavens, has a total of 33 heavens. Supreme Emperor Heaven is the first heaven. This is the second heaven, Supreme Brightness Heaven. The 33 heavens are actually linked with one another. Now that we are in Supreme Brightness Heaven, we aren't far from Supreme Emperor Heaven. As if he hadn't heard him, Qin Mu continued to say, "I learned this song from Grandpa Deaf of my village before. Grandpa Deaf is one of the best in terms of knowledge in my village, so what he taught me will never be wrong. However, Red Deity Qi Xiaoyu should be a woman, right? This song is written by a man, so it's a bit weird for her to be the one playing the tune. On top of that, there seemed to be an obvious grudge in this tune of hers. It doesn't seem to be used for killing people. Instead, it's used to scorn the person who had written this song." All of the injuries on Sakra Buddha's body suddenly healed. He took a step forward and said, "If we continue to walk up Supreme Brightness Heaven, it will be Pure Brightness Heaven. If we go up some more, it will be Dark Embryo Heaven." Back then, this place was extremely luxurious. Those skeletons that were chased off craned their necks, like a bunch of curious alpacas popping their heads over. Qin Mu persisted and kept explaining, "This song is played by a woman and even used to scorn the person who wrote this song. In that case, the person Red Deity Qi Xiaoyu is scorning is. What exactly do you want?" Sakra Buddha suddenly turned around and asked furiously. Qin Mu jumped in shock and immediately shut his mouth. Those skeletons also quickly ran away, rattling their bones. Sakra Buddha sneered and walked forward angrily. "I have already let go of all of my worldly desires, so don't mention the past. I have already let go long ago. She's the one who couldn't let go and keep pestering me. She got hold of information that can be used against me and has come to kill me straight. Is it my fault?" Qin Mu held back his smile and followed behind him. Sakra Buddha sneered and said, "She's clearly the one who is narrow-minded. I can't be blamed. When I haven't entered Buddhism in my early years, I had that period of romance. I thought I could live together with her, and forget about the fights between the celestial heavens and founding Emperor Celestial Heavens. How could I help when she is reluctant to give up her position and leave with me? When we met on the battlefield, how many brothers and sisters of mine had she killed? Such a ruthless woman. This is why I have cut off all ties with her. Qin Mu chased away those skeletons, burning with curiosity, as Sakra Buddha sighed. The reason why the reaction of the celestial heavens is so fast is because she still holds a grudge against me and thought I betrayed her. If her divine art had killed me just now, it's all right. She won't be chasing after me anymore. However, since she didn't kill me, this means she will definitely give chase. Her speed is unrivaled, so I can't run away with you. This was why I acted as if my injuries were too severe to let you leave without me. Yet you just had to tear through my lies, little friend Qin. Sometimes, it's not too good to be too clever. Qin Mu was silent for a moment and asked, "Can you escape from Red Deity's pursuit?" Sakra Buddha shook his head and said, "Her ship can travel through boundless worlds without obstructions. Her advantage in speed is number one in the world. How I escape her? I plan to go in the opposite direction, and pass through the 33 heavens of founding Emperor to hide. She will retreat if she can't find me. I can't bring you along with me, you will definitely die." Some ships could travel through all the worlds, and Qin Mu had seen this kind of ship before. Parameter Arc, that was made by the Heavenly Works God race, was one of those ships. Also, the ship that belonged to his father, Qin Hanjin, was that kind of ship as well. It had sailed from another world into the sky above great ruins. As Red Deity of the Southern Heaven, it was no surprise to have such a ship. Qin Mu nodded his head silently and said, "Bringing me along will also burden you. Buddha, let's part here." Sakra Buddha nodded in return and said, "She will reach this place very soon. I need to leave you as soon as possible. Do you have a way to return to Supreme Emperor Heaven?" Qin Mu said with a smile, "At most, I will just build another spirit energy mutual shift bridge. I'm more worried about you." Sakra Buddha's speed increased, and he pointed to the east. His voice moved further along with him. "If you head there, you should be able to find the road to Supreme Emperor Heaven." His figure quickly left into the distance and gradually vanished. Qin Mu opened his eyes and felt that his eyesight was recovering. He stuck the golden willow leaf back on his third eye. When he revealed his third eye, he didn't dare to execute Overlord Body 3 elixir technique, so it was best that he stuck it on during normal times. He walked towards the east and saw the place deserted. There were no living life forms to be seen, and there was a bunch of white bone balls that got blown everywhere. Whenever the wind stopped, those skeletons followed him like curious alpacas. The more daring ones even touched his clothes and pinched his cheeks. Qin Mu ignored these spirits as he headed east. Suddenly, he heard zither tunes coming from the sky. It was the tune of the phoenix seeks his mate. Even though it was a song of courtship and love, it brought along sorrow and hatred. The dim sky suddenly became bright as a ship that grew pairs of phoenix wings came sailing from another world. It appeared in the sky of supreme brightness heaven. The tune of the zither had come from that ship. Qin Mu was quite entranced by the music. At this moment, a terrifying consciousness came sweeping in all directions. It spread along the desolate land, flowing in supreme brightness heaven like a flood. When this wave of consciousness swept past Qin Mu's body, it paused slightly before flooding over him. It didn't lay its hands on Qin Mu. The ship flapped its pairs of phoenix wings and left with a beautiful arc across the sky. They didn't chase Qin Mu and went towards the direction where Sakra Buddha had left. Red Deity Qi Xiaoyu was not concerned about taking down Qin Mu. She was only interested in Sakra Buddha. What story does Sakra Buddha have with her? Maybe they are the main characters of their own story. Qin Mu persisted and kept explaining, this song is played by a woman and even used to scorn the person who wrote this song. In that case, the person Red Deity Qi Xiaoyu is scorning is. What exactly do you want? Sakra Buddha suddenly turned around and asked furiously. Qin Mu jumped in shock and immediately shut his mouth. Those skeletons also quickly ran away, rattling their bones. Sakra Buddha sneered and walked forward angrily. I have already let go of all of my worldly desires, so don't mention the past. I have already let go long ago. She's the one who couldn't let go and keep pestering me. She got hold of information that can be used against me and has come to kill me straight. Is it my fault? Qin Mu saw the flying ship sailing away. After settling his heart down, he refined his technique and continued to head east. The divine treasures of the devil path appeared behind his back, and he tried to fuse his 7 stars divine treasure with his 6 directions divine treasure into one. After walking for some time, he still couldn't see an end to supreme brightness heaven. Suddenly, Qin Mu stopped walking. He saw a majestic god city that stood upright there. This god city was bustling with people. There were gods standing at a high place, looking alertly in the surroundings. Qin Mu's body trembled slightly as he examined the surroundings. The dilapidated supreme brightness heaven had disappeared, and what replaced it was a supreme brightness heaven that had yet to fall under the war. Qin Mu looked at the terrains in the surroundings and his mind was blown. With those mountains that had crumbled standing up again, and the god city that had been destroyed reappearing fresh, the terrain here was actually the same as those on one of the maps Heavenly Saint Cult founding master had left behind. And what that map pointed at was this god city. Big Senior Brother is a person who existed after founding Emperor era had ended, so he couldn't have drawn a terrain before founding Emperor era was wiped out. He couldn't have pointed out this god city that had already ceased to exist. That's not right, something is wrong. Qin Mu's mind was in a flurry. Saint Woodcutter mentioned that some places in those maps of Big Senior Brother are extremely dangerous. Even he wouldn't dare to enter recklessly. Is that god city of supreme brightness heaven one of those dangerous places? Qin Mu's gaze flickered. He thought over and over again. He finally decided not to enter the god city, and to just walk around from the side. While walking on the side of the god city, he saw a figure out of the corner of his eye. He immediately stopped dead in his tracks. Sakra Buddha. Qin Mu literally cried out in astonishment. He saw another Sakra Buddha, or to be clear, he saw the Sakra Buddha of founding Emperor era. The Sakra Buddha of that time wasn't Buddha yet. He was a god with a youthful appearance and delicate features. There were no Buddha rays behind his head, and he wasn't wearing a Buddhist robe. He also wasn't barefooted. He wore a pair of gilded winged shoes on his feet, and his body was cladded in golden armor. At that time, Sakra Buddha wasn't a Buddha, he was a god with a high position. Qin Mu was stunned. Sakra Buddha wasn't by himself. Instead, he followed a few big shots and walked towards the center of the city. Qin Mu's heart thumped wildly as he followed up sneakily. Those people paid him no attention. Even those gods that were on alert in the city didn't seem to see him as well. Qin Mu was bewildered. Suddenly, he heard sounds of footsteps. He quickly turned his head back to take a look and saw a bunch of skeletons following behind him while tiptoeing, looking very sneaky. Qin Mu burst into laughter. These spirits look so funny trying to be sneaky. That's not right, these spirits are just mimicking me, so the sneaky one is actually. His face blushed and he continued to sneak forward. He came to Sakra Buddha's side and tried to grab his clothes. However, he grabbed nothing. His palm just passed through Sakra Buddha's clothes, not touching any physical substance. Qin Mu was astonished once again. He swung his hand in a wide arc. This time, his palm passed through Sakra Buddha's body, but he still didn't touch anything. This god city and these gods aren't real. Qin Mu was in a daze. Could this be an echo of history? An echo of history was the figure and voice of a strong practitioner being imprinted in space. It would only show after being touched. The figures of weaklings wouldn't be imprinted. However, there was an entire city here and there were a large number of commoners. It was obvious this wasn't an echo of history. And since he couldn't touch humans and gods in this city, this meant he didn't return back to the past. In that case, what was the matter with this god city? Sakra Buddha and those people walked as they talked. Looking at Sakra Buddha's bearing, these people should all be remarkable existences, and their positions were probably even above Sakra Buddha. Qin Mu went in front of them to take a good look at these people, but when he saw their faces, he was stunned. The faces of these people were actually blank. Each face had no eyes, ears, mouth, or nose. It was like a piece of paper was plastered on their faces. Those skeletons followed him and circled around to the front as well. Their jaws all dropped to the ground and it was evident that they were shocked too. Whoosh! Sakra Buddha and the rest passed through Qin Mu's body. He was in a daze. He couldn't feel anything passing through his body. He stretched out his hands and grabbed at them, but he couldn't grab anyone. Those skeletons were flustered as they groped the ground to find their dropped jaws. When these gods passed through them, they also shivered and dropped on the ground, not daring to move. The spirit in one of the skeletons should be more complete, because it gave off a crying sound. Ghost. Qin Mu walked around these skeletons and caught up to those figures while thinking to himself, these skeletons aren't mimicking me just now. I didn't get scared and didn't drop on the ground. Sakra Buddha was currently speaking with those few people. His voice was very faint, and it was nearly impossible to hear him. However, gradually, the voice became louder and clearer. Qin Mu listened to it carefully. He only heard the voice of a faceless figure that looked the most respectable in the group. Before our era, there are still a few eras. I had once searched the ruins of these eras, trying to find the origin of the enemies, wanting to see who is then our enemy. I went to Yudu and asked Earth Count. I also met Heaven Duke, who was currently observing the operations of the billions of stars. Numerous pre-celestial gods of the stars have also been visited by me. Come to speak of it, it's interesting. I discovered some things that are useful, but our enemies aren't like what we have imagined. The celestial heavens. Qin Mu moved forward to listen and the voice had become softer again. Before thinking of victory, we need to first think of defeat. Sakra, I need you to help me do something. Gather all the skilled craftsmen in the world and forge a place where we can survive even after we are defeated. Preserve a portion of our strength for a comeback. When I was searching the secrets of the celestial heavens, I found a marvelous place. The voice was becoming softer and softer until it couldn't be heard clearly. Qin Mu continued to follow them and the voice still became softer and softer until he couldn't hear anything anymore. Furthermore, as he walked forward, the figures of Sakra Buddha and the rest became more and more blurry. When they finally walked into a manor, the gods on both sides of the door closed it, and the figure of Sakra Buddha and the rest suddenly vanished. Qin Mu was stunned. He walked into the manor with these figures and when the door closed, Sakra Buddha and the rest vanished in front of his eyes. Such a situation, it should be a vision. Qin Mu lowered his head and pondered. He suddenly raised his head, and his eyes shone brightly. He smacked his fist on his palm. It's a vision. Someone must have seen this sight over 20,000 years ago, during founding emperor era, and he had transformed everything he saw in a part of his memory. I'm now inside a memory. Big senior brother, and I had both entered the memory of this person. Memory is what is projected in the mind from what one sees, and that person that saw this sight hasn't been into the manner. Therefore, the figures of Sakra Buddha and the rest would vanish after entering the manor. He went through the door and came outside to search with his gaze. He didn't see the faces of those few existences, so this meant that the abilities of those few existences are simply too strong. Their faces should have been covered by their own divine light, so this person couldn't see their faces clearly. All these people in his memory had no faces. In that case, where did he see such a sight? Qin Mu walked back to the path where he had come from and thought to himself, this person should have a strange appearance. He should have been a man with numerous heads to be able to see in all directions. There were many gods and many people walking to and fro in the city. It was very hard to determine which god's memory was it. This god city should be an extremely important place in Supreme Emperor Heaven. The numbers of gods were unbelievable, and a lot of them had cultivated primordial spirit forms that were strange and variegated. The primordial spirit forms of the 4 great spirit bodies in great ruins could be seen everywhere here. Gods with human heads and snake bodies could even be seen, and there were also gods with bird heads and human bodies, or human heads and bird bodies. They had all kinds of forms. Gods with numerous heads were also not rare at all. Qin Mu looked around and gods would pass through his body from time to time, yet he could never find this person who had seen this sight. The entire god city was basically recreated through the memory, so in that case, this person must have been standing on a high spot. Only at a high spot could one view the entire city and imprint it in his head. Qin Mu raised his head and looked towards the observation tower. In the observation tower, there was a god there that didn't have a face too. Qin Mu rose into the air, and he rapidly came to the tall observation tower. He flew around this god and saw that this god had 4 faces on one head. He had 9 eyes and vertical eyes in the heart of his brows. The hairpin on his head was like a pagoda canopy. On the tip of the canopy was also an eye and could see in all directions. It's you. I've fallen into your memory. Qin Mu was delighted and took a step forward to walk into the body of this god. Suddenly, the scenery in the surroundings changed quickly and the god city crumbled. All the people and gods in the city vanished. The skeletons in the god city were currently shivering on the ground. When the god city vanished, only dilapidated walls and piles of white bones were left everywhere. These skeletons were scared out of their wits and they ran around randomly like headless chickens. Where the observation tower should have stood originally, there was a deep hole. One skeleton couldn't steady his legs anymore and tumbled in, giving off a long shriek. Qin Mu tried to step on the air and was astonished. Just as he was about to execute divine art to fly, he suddenly felt a strange force field nullifying all of his divine arts. His body descended rapidly, and he could hear the shriek of the skeleton beside his ears. He hurriedly raised his hand and his vital qi shot out in all directions. Finally, a vital qi hooked onto something and he stabilized himself. Next, Qin Mu threw out another trail of vital qi to sweep up the skeleton that had fallen down. With a gentle flick, this skeleton flailed his limbs as he flew out and landed outside the deep hole. He was in a daze and didn't know what had just happened. The other skeletons came forward. They opened and closed their jaws to console him silently. Another bunch of skeletons went to the edge of the hole to look down. They actually saw an incomparably vast and hollow world under the ruin of the god city. It was pitch black inside, and they didn't know how deep and wide this hole was. Qin Mu hanging on a vital qi thread was like a small bug hanging in endless darkness. He was incomparably tiny. The skeletons looked at one another in determination, as they grabbed each other's legs to form a line. They tried to make a rope of white bones to rescue Qin Mu. At this moment, something shone in the darkness. Rays traveled out, but because it was too far, Qin Mu couldn't see anything clearly. He executed 9 Heaven's Eyes Awakening skill, but just as he executed it, his divine art was already scattered and his eyes almost exploded. He immediately gave up trying that. Thank you all. Qin Mu kept his vital qi thread back, and he came to the peak of the dark hole. With his head down and legs up, his legs were stuck firmly to the stone wall. He shouted loudly, "I shall go down to take a look first. You guys can rescue me later." At the end of the white bone rope, that skeleton shook his head. Qin Mu suddenly kicked off forcefully with his legs. He shot off like an arrow going towards that light. In the boundless darkness, the youth seemed to sink into a dark sea, and beside his ears were just the sounds of wind. From the sky of the dark cavern to the light below was actually such an incomparably long journey. Qin Mu descended continuously, his blood running cold as his speed of descent became faster and faster. If he continued to fall like this and couldn't execute any divine art to slow himself, he would probably turn into a pile of mush. He tried to execute his divine art. Just as his vital qi formed a rune marking, the rune scattered the next instant, unable to take shape. This underground cavern seemed to have a strange power that could disrupt the operation of his technique and his divine art. Qin Mu soon realized that this kind of disruption was on his consciousness. Every time he tried to execute his divine art, there would be a strange power that messes up his thoughts. This made him unable to execute his divine art. Mental divine arts. Qin Mu was astonished. Even though this kind of divine art was rarely seen, great educational heavenly devil scriptures had some records in regards to divine arts of this field. They were divine arts that relied on the strong brainwaves, aiming towards the mind. They were usually illusion attacks. This caused the opponent to sink into a hallucination, making them unable to differentiate between what was real and what was fake. At this time, he could use his own divine arts to break out of the land of fantasy and peer into the truth, killing the opponent. However, the mental divine art in this underground cavern was even more profound. It struck his consciousness directly and made him unable to break the opponent's mental divine art. Mental divine art is a direction that is worthy of studying. I need to tell Imperial Preceptor about it once I return. We can train some scholars with mental divine arts. If they are on the battlefield and burst forth with mental divine art, the enemies will be unable to execute their divine arts. It would be as easy as slaughtering livestock. Bah, why am I thinking of this now? I'm almost becoming mush now. Despite that Qin Mu couldn't focus his consciousness, his corporeal body was still incomparably strong. He took a step and tried to sprint in the darkness. He tried to use an incomparably astonishing speed to allow himself to sprint in the air. Next, he discovered a strange point. The air in this place was very thin. The more he descended down, the thinner the air became. Even if he sprinted with his legs, he couldn't borrow any strength. Right at this moment, he saw a star. That star was actually only the size of a basket. It should be a grain of star sand. Big senior brother star sand. He has indeed come here before. Qin Mu was delighted. When he stepped on this star sand, it descended rapidly after being pressed down. However, there was a strange power in the star sand that was resisting against the strange force field here. His increasing momentum while falling down gradually slowed, and instead, there was a momentum that was going to spring him back up. Qin Mu immediately squatted, and his legs exerted force to spring himself outward. He landed on another star sand and he leaped around as though he was flying. He stepped on dozens of star sands and quickly closed in where the light in the Earth's core was. Where the Earth's core was giving off light, a flat platform was floating in the darkness. There were steps in all 4 directions. The bottom was wide and the top was narrow. This platform, just floated alone in the center of the darkness, like a sacrificial altar that was hanging in the air. Qin Mu landed on the sacrificial altar, and turned his head back to look at star sands that floated in the darkness. Founding Master had apparently found his way here and laid a formation. Which also meant that the thing on this sacrificial altar was a thing that Founding Master wanted to leave behind for Saint Woodcutter. What exactly is this thing? Big Senior Brother has already left two things behind. One is God Execution Mysterious Knife, a human head that was stuffed into a case. The other is a commander's seal that is from some era. In that case, what's the thing on this sacrificial altar? He looked towards the center of the sacrificial altar, and saw that there was a stone coffin there. He didn't know what stone this coffin was made out from. It was covered with relief markings that looked like a kind of sealing spell. This stone coffin was over 30 yards long and 10 yards wide. It was very huge, and wouldn't be considered a coffin of an ordinary person. It was where the god was buried. Qin Mu tried to execute 9 Heaven's Eyes Awakening skill, but he was still unable to execute his divine art. He hesitated for a moment before taking down the golden willow leaf on the heart of his brows. He then used his third eye to look at the stone coffin. He couldn't see any abnormalities with this eye of his, but he could faintly see there was no corpse in the stone coffin. There was only a huge jar inside. Qin Mu stuck the golden willow leaf back on the heart of his brows and walked forward. What's the logic of placing a huge jar in the coffin? He carefully used his vital qi to touch this stone coffin. There was no abnormality. Qin Mu didn't relax, as he moved quickly around the stone coffin like a spirit cat. He tested out over and over again, but there was still no abnormality. Only then was he at ease, and he walked forward to try to open up the stone coffin. The lid of the coffin was extremely heavy. He used all the strength he had to finally shift open the lid of the coffin a little. There was indeed a huge jar inside the stone coffin. Looking from the coffin's small opening, he saw a head placed inside the jar. The head had 4 faces, and there was a hairpin with the shape of a pagoda canopy on top. There was also an eye there. This head was soaked in strange water, and it seemed to be still alive. The eye on top of the canopy suddenly opened up, and his gaze fell upon Qin Mu's face. This video will end here.